Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam, ya habibi. God bless you, brother Mahan, for your wisdom, for your teaching, for your tamassuk, for your perseverance and tenacity in seeing this vision of Ramadan Unscripted through. So may God bless you for that, and for your
Alhamdulillah. Thank God bless you. We took a leap. We weren't sure. Honestly, I wasn't sure if we'll be able to pull it off every night, given everything else that occupies us. But I think in Ramadan, you kind of can make a commitment. And we were blessed, despite everything, to be able to get to the 27th night. So it's a blessed night.
Yes, and and maybe when we begin, we can talk a little bit about the night of power. I think because we never know for sure, but if indeed tonight is the night of power, even if it isn't, we are certainly in the season of the night of power, and so that may be something we'll want to talk about for a few minutes before we plunge in, knowing that the night of power is also a it's a Quranically celebrated reality. So we'll talk about that inshallah tonight a little bit. Also,
Yeah.
I just wanted to reflect upon this whole appeal that we've been doing. We've been certainly deeply grateful for those who have made this journey with us, either in real time or in non-linear time. And we certainly deeply appreciate and need people to support the college and to support and to be part of this conversation, to be part of this growing collective dream of the American Islamic College. But we also want to acknowledge that one way that people can support the college is by enrolling in our courses. And I know that we've got some really exciting courses that are open to the wider public happening this summer. So I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about what's happening this summer, because this is also a very important way. I always tell the students that that their role in helping to establish this historic institution is to finish what they start and to be committed to their studies and to take it seriously. And that itself is a massive, contribution to what we're building. And so too, I'd really love to encourage, our sisters and brothers in, all around the world, really, to really consider taking a course. So what do we have on the books again this summer?
Sure. I mean, we're offering some great electives. And also, I want to first start out by thanking the people who actually donated last night. Thank you.
Yes.
You know who you are. You'll be hearing from us. And we're incredibly full. But yes, enroll in our classes. So we've got courses for credit, but also courses for continuing, professional development. We're putting out some certificates for Islamic, teachers in a classroom instruction, but also for educational administration. We have a wonderful course for imams. Brother Asad Kosal is going to be teaching how to make the seerah relevant. And he uses, video clips from the Omar series, and he breaks it down into very, very pointed analytical lessons in setting the scene. Who are the characters? What is being discussed? How is it being handled? And its, relevance to our life today. He does an absolutely incredible job, and his syllabus and curriculum has been endorsed by people like Imam Zaid and Imam Majid and others. So, but the 4 credit classes, which you don't have to be enrolled for a degree, you can just take it for enrichment. One of those classes is an immersion within Chicago. So you'll have to come to Chicago, spend a couple of weeks in early June, being taught by Rebecca Kaufman. She works at the Chicago History Museum, and her course is on Islam in Chicago and Urban Religious Futures, Heritage Studies for the 21st Century. And she looks at the materials at the museum, but also the lived history within the city of Chicago. There are a number of site visits. We have Azhar Usman. Some of you might know Azhar, as a comedian. He's also a great intellect. He actually has a law degree, and he's been working not just on stage as a comedian, but also consulting and advising script writers within Hollywood. And there's how do you tell your stories? How do you shape the narrative um, that people tend to consume and then form opinions about you? So the Hollywood industry, the media industry, pop culture industry is incredibly influential. And he's teaching a course on rewriting the script, the rise of Muslim creatives in Hollywood and pop culture. And these are all available online, other than the museum course. So take a class with Azhar Usman. We have a really interesting doctoral student in New York. She's going to teach about how people learn from an Islamic perspective. Sister Aya, she's also, her background is in mechanical engineering, but now she's turned to the study of Islam. And she used to be an engineer for Formula One race cars. So very, very interesting person, teaching a relevant class on different learning styles and what that means for Islamic education. And then Brother Omar Muzaffar, who's chaplain at Loyola, a very influential person within Chicago. If you are a beginner, even if you're not Muslim, if you know someone who just wants one class on Islam, like A to Z, no holds barred, any question is welcome, then you can take a class with Omar Muzaffar, Islam for Everyone in a Troubled World. If you are like a serious, thinker, intellectual, philosophical, you can take a class with Dr. Basit Bilal Koshal. He's a professor at LUMS, but he has 2 PhDs, one from the University of Virginia and one from Drew University in the sociology of religion and philosophical theology. And he's teaching a course that's titled 7 Types of Atheism and One Maddening Puzzle. Actually, that's the first part of his. The full title is 7 Types of Atheism and One Maddening Puzzle: God in Modern Thought and Pre-Modern Culture. So you can see course descriptions on our website. You can go to, if you go to aicusa.edu, under academics, you'll see the tab on continuing education and professional development. And you can see all the classes there. We also have a Summer Arabic Language Institute. Our Arabic instructor is a wonderful, wonderful brother. He studied at Al-Azhar and then got a PhD in Arabic language and linguistics from the University of Utah. And he's in Michigan, but he teaches these classes online. So check out these wonderful opportunities for learning, continuing education at AIC. And this is one way you can also, support the college by participating and inviting others who are looking for interesting and credible courses. Also, if you're a student who needs classes for credit that can transfer as electives to their home institution, definitely talk to us, because the college is accredited and we may be able to provide that for you as well. Marhaban. Welcome.
Marhabteen.
All right. With that, we begin.
The mission and vision of the American Islamic College, to me, pretty much now synonymous with the work. I believe in the transformative power of education, and not just education that is informative, but in education that is transformative, education that really changes how we live. But I think that the Muslims of America need a place that they can come as a Muslim space. This is their space. It belongs to them. All right. And correcting myself once again, the American Islamic College belongs to you and to me and to all of us. This is our collective dream for a better future, for not just for the Muslim community and the Muslim mosaic with all of its beautiful diversity, but for the people of planet Earth. We're not doing too well right now. We see the violence, we see the racism, we see the supremacism, the religious supremacism. And there has to be a better way. And in my humble view, the way forward has to include higher education. Education truly, if we understand education properly and holistically, education is the way that we are led out of the barbarism and the ignorance and into into the luminosity of knowledge and tolerance and forbearance and all that is good and life-giving. And so if there is an answer for humanity, it has to include education. And so thank you all for being with us and for supporting us and for enrolling in our classes and for being with us tonight. So let's jump in.
We have a question.
Oh,
It may have been in response to our attempt to historicize the Qur'an. He's quoting poetry. I think it's Iqbal. खुद बदलते नहीं कुरान को बदल देते हैं. Like they don't change themselves, they change the Quran. How Quran को बदल देते हैं. हुए किस दर्जे फकीहाने haram बेतौफीक. Like how unfortunate, how unfortunate are the faqihan, like the fuqaha, the thinkers,
the scholars
of the who are supposed to be the guardians of the haram, or the scholars of the sacred precinct. In गुलामों का ये मसलक है कि नाकिस है किताब. So these servants in गुलामों का, these servants, their creed is that the book is flawed or that it's incomplete. कि सिखाती नहीं मोमिन को गुलामी के तरीक़. But it doesn't teach the believer how to be a slave of God. And so basically it's a critique on, I think, reinterpretation in ways that maybe it hasn't been interpreted before, historicizing the text such that what it actually says is particularized, for a particular culture, but not necessarily universal in the way that it had been considered to be universal before. So what do you think of that kind of critique?
Well, I mean, that kind of critique is, I mean, there's a kind of moral and ethical dimension, which is just amazingly powerful. And that is that, we, rather than do the hard work of changing ourselves, we want to change a book that makes us uncomfortable, right? And of course, like all sacred texts, like prophecy, as we've reflected in earlier nights, prophecy doesn't come to pat us on the back and to tell us we're doing a great job, right? So prophecy is this divine intervention in history to make us uncomfortable, yarhamukum Allah, and to make us really reflect on ourselves and to change. And so I think that's a really powerful point. The other thing is that it's a delicate subject. Muslims traditionally do not see the Quran as being bound by history, right? Even though it is in dialogue with history, and it does refer to historical events, to cultural realities that were on the ground at the time, and so the Quran has an interesting relationship to history. The Muslim belief is that it literally was sent down. The Quran descended upon, so it's not a product of history. We don't talk about the authors of the Quran in the way we might talk about the authors of other sacred texts, different parts or different books or different portions of other texts. The Quran is believed to be a holistic, coherent, non-linear recitation that is itself a kind of whole. And yet it, there are places where, I think we rightfully ask, and again, the answers are known only really to the author of the Quran, who's, the creator of the heavens and the earth. So it's beyond us. But there are places where I think we have to ask and struggle with the question as to whether this particular verse is descriptive of a particular reality that was happening on the ground at the time, or whether this is prescriptive, meaning that says like this is the way things have to be in all at all times and in all cultures. And so, the point of these evenings, of course, is not to present to the world a definitive, thorough analysis of the entirety of the Quran. These nights were really just meant to be two two people, sometimes three, on those evenings when we were blessed with company. Just some sincere seekers who are really engaging the text, really trying to make sense of it, struggling with parts that we don't quite get or that we're not quite sure what to do with, and to invite other people to befriend this text and to join us in that process of tadabbur, of reflection and tafakkur and rational analysis and thinking and contemplation. And so I think that that reading any sacred text is dangerous, because we're always in danger of projecting our own biases, our own assumptions, our own emotions upon a text, which and this sometimes can mean that we're seeing something in the text that isn't there, or that maybe we're giving color to something which in a way that maybe is not natural to the text. But one thing that is a safeguard in that process is that we're doing this together, and we're doing it in public. And so that means that we're kind of interrogating ourselves and interrogating each other while we're interrogating this text, and trying to really sincerely extract from the text lessons, values, principles, teachings that are of interest and are of service to our life in the contemporary world. And so that's never going to be that's always going to be a little bit messy, and that's never going to be finished. We're going to be doing this our whole life. In fact, we could, if we were crazy enough, we could start over again once we get through the entire Quran, and it would be probably completely different, because we would be seeing new things and having new thoughts and new insights. And so, I think that we just have to be humble, and we have to be sincere, and we have to be engaged. And what we really wanted is, we wanted these nights to be nights of befriending the Quran, engaging the Quran, celebrating the Quran, holding the Quran up sometimes like a prism to see the light that is refracted and reflected from these verses. And and so we offer it to each other and to ourselves and to the world in that spirit of humility. We're just a couple of brothers who are trying to figure it out like everybody else.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Hamim. There's the two letters, Ha and Mim. Tanzilul kitabi min Allahil Azizil Alim. Like you said, the revelation of this book, or the scripture, sent down, Tanzil, is sent down from God, the Almighty, the All-Knowing. The rhythm, I find the rhythm of the Surah Ghafir, especially the second ayah, it's something different. Because if you look at the next verse, it's غافر الذنب وقابل التوب شديد العقاب ذي الطول. It's totally different.
Yeah.
You don't hear this. Yeah. Usually the rhyme scheme of these Meccan surahs is fairly smooth in the beginning.
Yeah.
There may be a change of ending but this is غافر الذنب وقابل التوب شديد العقاب ذي الطول. And then also these are the way that it's an idafa, like the attributes of God are coming as would you say possessives, right?
Or compound nouns.
Or
Nominal structures, right?
غافر الذنب, like
the forgiver of sin,
acceptor of repentance, strict of punishment, the taul, possessor of long reach in all things, your infinite bounty. La ilaha illahu, there is no God but him. Ilayhil masir, and to him is the return. So beautiful change of rhythm in Surah Ghafir. But the key point here, and you will see it over and over again, is Fad'ullah. Remember in Zumar it was Fa'bud Allah, so worship God.
Worship God.
مخلصين له الدين, the purity of faith in the deen. And then this is فَادْعُوا اللَّهَ, now call upon God. مخلصين له الدين, with the purity of faith in this deen. And there's lots of repetition on the calling aspect.
Yeah.
Call on me and I will respond to you.
Yeah.
And then, I'm ready almost to jump to Fussilat.
No. Don't jump. Don't jump.
Go ahead.
No, well, I mean, just a few things to savor. Like
Yeah.
Ghafir, the title of this chapter of the Quran, is just one of the many ways in which God's forgiveness is captured in these divine attributes or divine names. So, in addition to Ghafir, which is, we call it ism fa'il, it's just a simple active participle, someone who's in the act of forgiving. But we also have Ghaffar, which means the one who is forgiving all the time, as a habitual, this is another wazn, another form of the Arabic active participle of doing. So this is the one who's doing it like a khabbaz, like a baker, someone who's baking every day. God is forgiving every day. And then we have Ghafur, right? Like a forgiver of big sins. Like when you're despairing of God's mercy, remember that God can forgive even like massive, enormous enormities. And then we have Afu. Afu, from my understanding, in the Arabic comes from a meaning of like the way traces of a camp would be completely wiped out in the desert by the winds that blow the sands. And so this would be like the one who not only forgives sin, but completely erases even the sin and the transgression and the effects of that transgression. So like there's so many nuances to each of these names of God in the Quran that refer to forgiveness. And so, in forgiveness, of course, isn't just on the divine level. We're going to see some verses tonight, if we have time, that also talk about the importance of human forgiveness and of forgiving other people instead of taking a penalty or imposing a penalty or imposing vengeance. So I just wanted to stop and just bask in the light of that, because it's so rich,
Yeah, thanks for helping us pause there. Yeah, and we'll see it's in Surah At-Taghabun. I remember this verse. It's coming where it says wa in ta'fu wa tasfahu wa taghfiru. And that was explained to me, linguistically, as kind of three ways of forgiving. Like afu is, like you said, it's like it never happened.
Right.
And so, instead of saying I forgive you, you say no, nothing happened. You don't even acknowledge that there was a slight. And then what tasfahu is when you look away, like it happened, but you pretend it didn't happen. Like a safha, a page has like two sides, and you just like look away. And then taghfiru is you cover up, like a mighfar is a help. And so it happened, it happened, and like I saw it, but like you cover up for them, and instead of wiping away, you know it's there, but you conceal it. And so there's different ways of forgiving, and they're all have their unique beauty, but there's times when all of them come together.
Yeah. Okay, so can I pull out another pearl from this?
Pull, brother.
Good. I'm now looking at ayah 39 and ayah 40. So verse 39 and 40.
Okay.
And so and one of the verses has to do with the superiority of the next world over this world, right? Oh, my people, this life of the present is nothing but just a distraction or convenience. The hereafter, that is the real home that is abiding. And then this part, he that works evil will only be requited by its like, right? He that does something, who does evil, will only be repaid or requited by mithlaha, something that's similar to it, right? And so and then it says, and he that works a righteous deed, or who lives righteously, whether man or woman, and is a believer, such will enter the gardens. And we read about the great rewards of paradise. But I'm wondering, is this similar to the Eastern idea? Because right now in my world religions course, we're talking about, about karma, and we're talking about, the cycles of life, death, and rebirth in Hinduism and Buddhism and Jainism and the Eastern traditions. But this idea of karma, this idea that what you do is going to come back and revisit you, and in some ways it's going to be a reflection, or it's going to be a force that that you cannot deny. So I'm wondering, so even as I was reading that tonight, I thought, maybe this is a kind of Quranic expression of almost a law of karma.
The commentary says it's pretty much, by mithla means it's like that the punishment will never exceed the crime.
Okay.
And I think the contrast is, at least one way to read it, but the reward can exceed the
virtue.
The virtue by much. But I see the reading into it there, and maybe there's something to explore.
No, and that's a really nice way of seeing it. So in a way, the promise, which we're going to read again and again and again in the Quran, that God will never do injustice to a single soul,
right.
Meaning that God will never impose a punishment that is greater than the offense, right?
Right.
But when it comes to virtue, that God will, rather lavishly reward those who believe and who work righteously. And even if they mess up, and they have repentance, or if they're sorry for what they've done, that God will forgive them.
Yes. And, I understand that there's some parables, like the parable of the laborers in the Bible, where, and I think it appears in our tradition as well, where, there's laborers are hired and for a certain wage, and they start working in the morning. And then there's another group that comes and they start later and they get the same wage. And there's another group that comes and they start like an hour before it's supposed to conclude, and they get the same wage. And so, the first group of people think that this is unjust.
Right.
And the way that I've tried to understand it is, no. You each got the wage you were promised, right?
Right.
And to some that was given excess, but don't begrudge that. The problem comes when you look at the other one. But if you were content with what you had, be grateful for it, but don't look to another one. I don't know if that's an appropriate reading of it. And I think people who think more in terms of equity, this kind of stuff bothers them. But the way I read some of these scriptures, it's, well, this is not your business. Like, God apportions things differently to people. You just won't get less than, what you deserve, but you may get much more if
Right.
God wants to increase with his bounty. And when he does that for whom he wills, don't begrudge that. Be grateful for what you have. And so, the point is to look at yourself and not the other.
Well, and certainly if we were to imagine people in the next world who are complaining about their neighbors in paradise, right? Wondering how did this guy get here? Like, how did this, and writing letters to the throne of God, petitions, complaining about their neighbors. That in a way is kind of a similar thing. Like we make ourselves miserable when we compare ourselves to other people, and of course we never have the full knowledge of whatever they did or they didn't do, or what they deserve or don't deserve. But we're kind of guilty sometimes of that judgment with partial knowledge that Musa is being corrected in the Surah of the Cave. Again, like, he's imposing judgment upon a situation without having the full understanding of what's really going on. And we do that all the time when we make ourselves miserable. One would
Right.
only hope that in the next world we'd be willing to let go of that and be grateful that we have neighbors at all.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're going to look at someone else, you should look at someone who has less than you, and then be grateful for what you have, but also be generous with what you have, rather than the other way around, and begrudging why someone else has something, and then leading to ingratitude for the many blessings that you might have, but then are unable to see. Yeah.
Last question for you here, and this is interesting. We read in the Quran all the time that when God wants something to exist, he just says to it be, and it is. And we see that here on ayah 68 in Surah Ghafir, that he who gives, it is he who gives life and death, and when he decides upon an affair, he says to it be, and it is. So I've heard this same kind of dynamic spoken of by a Christian theologian friend who refers to it as speaking into being, right? That when God speaks into being. And I'm wondering about, this mystery of the human being as God's Khalifa, as God's vicegerent, or God's steward, or God's successor, however we want to understand that. And the fact that we've been given limited capacity to manifest God's qualities, like mercy, like forgiveness, like being a refuge for one another, being just, being forbearing and patient. And I'm wondering if, as a theomorphic being, then as a creature that sort of has God's spirit in the middle, breathed into us, what does this say about us and our use of language?
The language is very limited. I mean, that's a great question. But also, you can see in this very verse, there's a paradox, because it's almost indicating that, now forgive me because this is limited language and I'm not saying this, but it's almost indicating that God is in time. فَإِذَا قَضَى أَمْرًا, like when God decides a thing, that means something happened from one moment to the next. Like but we know that this is very problematic philosophically.
Because
right?
God is outside of time.
Yeah, to think of God within time. But the verse is almost, presenting it as if this is in time. And then there's no time. فَإِنَّمَا يَقُولُ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ. So he says be, and it is. There's no time.
Right.
So in a sense, that which takes time, which is things that are supposed to come into be, is no time. And that which is outside of time is almost being presented as being in time. So there's a paradox in this verse. And these are limits of language. And so I think this is why it was a question asked early on about mutashabihats, like verses that are metaphorical or allegorical. And these are such kinds of verses that when you try to rationalize them, you're going to lose and if you try and put them into a formula, you're going to put God into a box that God has himself not put himself into, other than the fact that he has to communicate to us through language, which has its own limitations. And so take these for what they're worth, but don't try and pin God down into a box, a thought box. And then that's your own box that you're making for God. And you have to be careful with that.
That's a really important point. What about when it comes to our use of language? Do you think, do we even have the slightest, obviously we don't create in the way that God creates, but language is still important, and the way we use language is really important. And I think that we even in his meditation on the divine names, Imam Ghazali says that like, God is the musawwir, God is the one who sort of give shape and form to something before it has shape and form in the world. And in some ways, human beings, we do that to a limited extent as well. We have a vision, and then we can work toward making that vision a reality. But I think also with speech, I think that the gift of speech is, to me, I think this tells us how powerful speech is. And I think that we have to be really much more mindful. I'm thinking of myself in particular, but I need to be much more mindful about the way I use speech, because sometimes when things leave our lips, sometimes they take on a force and a causative force or power that can be either very, very helpful or can be very destructive.
Yeah. And there's this advice, this verse is recited on the nikah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha, or you believe, revere God, have fear of God or reverence God. Waqulu qawlan sadida, and speak, directly and plainly. Like don't play around so much, with words, because I think for exactly this reason, that they can have they take on a life of their own, and you can hurt people unintentionally by playing around like that. And so, I mean, there's a place for, I think, lightheartedness, but we're actually cautioned to be very careful with speech.
Okay, I know I'm slowing us down, but
No, these are great. There, we could do. There's a Quran you can read. I can't remember which companion it was who said, there's a Quran I read in 3 days, and one in a month, and one in a year, and one that I've not yet finished. I'm messing up the narration, but the idea was that there are different levels of reading, and we could take probably a month on the surah.
Yeah.
So it's fine to pause, and we have to pass over so many things. Where do you want to go next?
No, I'm going to let you steer the boat now. So you tell us where you think we should. Again, we're moving through these hawamim, these 7 surahs that start with hamim. So where would you like to sort of land for the next?
Let's go to Fussilat or Hamim Masajda, Surah 41. Again, it begins Hamim.
Yes.
Tanzilum min ar-Rahmanir Rahim. So again, the Tanzil, the coming down.
Yeah.
Kitabun Fussilat ayatuhu. A scripture whose verses are made distinct or explained in detail. Qur'an and Arabiyan, an Arabic Qur'an. Liqawmi ya'lamun, for people who understand, or who know, who are capable of knowing. And I want to go to verse number. I've marked a number of things here. It talks about the earth being. There's some cosmology here.
Yeah.
Verse 9. So say, how can you disregard the one who created the earth in 2 days?
Yeah.
So you've got this again, a kind of period of time, and then and you set up other gods as his equals. He is the Lord of all the world, and he placed solid mountains on it, blessed it, measured out its varied provisions for all who seek them, all in 4 days.
Right.
Then ثُمَّ اسْتَوَىٰ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ, then he turned to the sky, which was smoke. وَهِيَ دُخَانٌ. And so some people like to see this, as the nebulas, as the gases were were. If you want to read it in light of modern, knowledge, and he said, فَقَالَ لَهَا وَلِلْأَرْضِ.
I love this part, actually.
Yeah, he said to it and to the earth, come into being, willingly or unwillingly.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot. Yeah.
And then they answer.
And they said, yeah, we come willingly. So who knows what this means, right? So he completed them as 7 firmaments, right? Or 7 heavens. Uh, again in 2 days, and assigned an order to each. So there's some interesting cosmology here. But I want to, for discussion purposes in this surah, verse 30 to 36 are.
Yeah, that was where I was hoping we would stop. Yeah.
So, Inna alladhina qalu Rabbuna Allah thumma istaqamu. So it's for those who say our Lord is God, and then stand straight and steadfast. Like they don't waver from this. And so think in terms of, not just creed, but in terms of your orientation in life and who you're obedient to and who you serve ultimately is only God. And then they stand firm. Now, if you can have this disposition, then the angels will descend on you. And they will say, have no fear. And so this is a really high station, right? And think of all the times when we've been frightful, I'm thinking myself, or nervous, right? It's when maybe this belief is not in the forefront. We're worried about our image. We're worried about pleasing someone else, or we're worried about failing, right? But that all that stuff is secondary, right? If you believe in God and stand firm and have your trust in Him, then you do the best you can, but you don't worry about those other things. You let God worry about those other things.
Right.
And so there's a certain composure that and a comportment that one develops. The have no fear, nor have any grief, and rejoice in the good news of paradise. Already, like in this world, there's a sense that there's something, there's a good end to this, which you have been promised. We are your allies in this world and in the world to come. So you have allies that are unseen. And so why would you worry, right? If this is something that descends on you. I mean, you develop a kind of confidence in God. I mean, I'm thinking of the Force is your ally, right? We see this in Star Wars. Like you have something, right? There they call it the Force. But you have, what we believe in.
Yeah, you have God and the angels who are descending upon you.
Descending upon you, right?
As your allies. Yeah.
Yeah. And we are allies in the world to come, where you will have everything you desire and ask for. Nuzulan min ghafurir rahim.
Yeah.
And so, all the things you desire and ask for, the things that are mentioned in the Qur'an in terms of the pleasures and delights of paradise, this is called here nuzul. And we're reading Tanzilul Kitab. It's the same kind of root, the coming down. Nuzul is what the kind of the initial hospitality a rider gets when he dismounts. But it's not, we know from other traditions that in paradise is ineffable. So it's what no eye has ever set eyes on, no ear has ever heard, nor has ever occurred to the human heart. And so what is actually there is unknown to us, but it's described in ways that we can relate to. And this is the biggest indication that this is a historical text as well as eternal, that all the examples that are given of pleasures are to people who are in a certain environment, a desert environment, and this is another thing.
Gardens beneath which rivers flow. Tajri min tahtiha anhar.
Yeah. And we will see, also maidens, fair maidens, and fruits. Even the example of God as a throne, as a sovereign, as a king who governs. I mean, are all of these things, really? Can you rethink them for your own time, right? Without changing the Quran, like we were critiqued last time, but but realizing that they're not necessarily literally true, but they're allusions, they're allusive to something that appeals to us, and we can somehow project that onto what might be, but then leave it at that, not necessarily fix a determined, you
Right.
know, form for it.
But I think it helps to remember that we have language here pointing, and really every verse of the Quran is a pointer, right? An ayah, a sign,
A
a
sign,
signifier, something that points to something else. And that language here is pointing to something which is outside of time, outside
right?
of space, outside of language even. And so we just have to know, even, Imam Ghazali says that, we have words like angels, we have words like, things that refer to beings that are not from this plane.
Right.
And so he says, these words are just holding places for realities that we can't even really begin to understand in a comprehensive way. And so we just have to be humble about the fact that we can't really say definitively what's there, but we can say that the Quran is giving us a clear, and giving its original audience, obviously, a very clear indication that it's a good place, and that it's a place of well-being, and it's a place of repose, it's a place of joy, it's a place of community, it's a place of, it's and so and maybe more than that, we don't need to say.
Yeah. And then, that's kind of the first 3 verses of this section. And then it turns to conduct in this world, and it's that progression, fa'budillah, fad'ullah, waman ahsanu. Now here's waman ahsanu qawlam mimman da'a ilallah. Here's that verse.
Okay,
So
so
who is better in speech than the one who calls towards God?
mm,
So the previous surah was the one who calls to God,
mm.
and now the one who calls towards God. It's a subtle shift, even in English.
Or we might say that with the first one who calls upon God,
Yeah, calls upon
and
God,
then one who's calling others to God.
others to God, right?
Yes, yeah,
And but see, such a person, it's warning against hypocrisy. Wa amila salihan, and also himself or herself, themselves have the right conduct.
yeah,
وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, and says, I am amongst those who submit. Like,
yeah.
I myself am a submitter. I'm amongst them. مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ.
Mm.
Not even like the foremost, or
I'm just one of them.
I'm just one of the
Yeah,
submitters.
yeah,
And good and evil, وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ, cannot be equal.
right.
This is, a climax like we had in Surah Al-Ma'idah, the 5th surah, with the 2 sons of Adam, and then the traditions that, be like the better of the 2 sons of Adam who didn't reciprocate his brother's violence. Here you have another really lovely verse on nonviolence. It's not just turn the other cheek,
No,
it's actually do something good in return.
yeah, or repel.
Repel.
Good. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
too much.
So repel
Yeah.
that which is evil by something that is better and
That
more
is
beautiful.
better. And I think of the stories from the life of the Prophet where, he was being reviled. And sometimes this old woman, she would throw garbage on him when he
That's a
walked
great
past.
story.
And then one day she didn't do it. And he's like, where is she? And it's like, she's unwell. And so he went and visited her and asked about her health. And she was so moved by that. But we would probably say, thank God, I avoided her, or I hope she dies, or I hope I never see her again.
Mm.
He doesn't have to do anything bad to her. He's just like, thank God, I'm rid of her. But he instead did something good. And this is like where I see the Prophet as the, in these little things, as the perfect model. Uh, and so imagine if we did good to people who harmed us. I mean, this is such a difficult thing.
Yeah, but read the rest of this
I
this
know.
ayah, because it takes us to that place.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so if you do that, right? So you're repelling evil or responding to evil actively with something which is better and more beautiful than the evil that you're responding to. Then, right, the one between the one between this kind of twisted in English, but
Between whom and you is enmity.
yeah, so the one who's been your enemy
Right.
will become like your bosom buddy, your dear friend,
Yeah.
right?
That
Your
this is conflict transformation.
right,
You change the relationship
right.
by doing something good. But see, some people think this is irrational. Some people think it's doesn't make sense. But the next verse is like that almost like this is the climax. وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا. There it is.
Right.
Now, only those, no one will be granted such goodness except those who exercise patience,
Yeah.
self-restraint. وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا ذُو حَظٍّ عَظِيمٍ. And
Mm.
and no one can will experience this, be granted this, except those who have been endowed with great fortune. This is a
But there's no way you can do this. There's no way
that
you can respond to something low with something high or something ugly with something beautiful unless you have patience
yeah,
and self-restraint. Because what you're doing is you're overriding your temptation and your desire, your base desire to say, you treat me like an animal, I'm going to treat you like an animal, or I'm, to respond in kind. And so it's only with this self-restraint and this patience that you would be able to respond to evil with something better and more
good.
beautiful.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think it needs to be done, if it's done in an instrumental way, like now I'm doing good for you and you better transform this relationship. I don't think it works. I think you have to go into it without that expectation, just as a genuine well wisher, for it to work. Um, that's
Yeah.
that's really important. And then, I think this next verse is part of the sequence. وَإِمَّا يَنزَغَنَّكَ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ نَزْغٌ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ. But if prompting from Satan should stir you, because at such moments we're prompted, stick it to them,
Mm.
right? Respond in kind, or do them one like hit them back twice as hard,
Yeah.
right, to teach them a lesson. And so this is all kind of promptings of Satan. And we also have to keep in mind, I think there's interpersonal relationships, but there's also like collective moments of conflict. And they have, I think they call for different kinds of responses, and you have to be aware. But I think what this is telling us is in most interpersonal situations, maybe in some cases of collective conflict, but I feel that this is more speaking about kind of an individual, believer in going about normal life and encountering these kinds of, difficult situations, to conduct themselves in this manner, and they'll be able to transform. They'll be at peace. Angels will descend upon them. They will have confidence, and they will be self-assured, and they will be able to transform the relationships that they have all around them.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. There's a beautiful story. I know that this is getting a little extra Quranic, but I remember speaking with some of the original followers of the Sufi Sheikh Bawa Muhyiddin, who came from Sri Lanka. He was this bright-eyed mystic who came from Sri Lanka to Philadelphia and was
Mm.
hanging out or was giving these spiritual like talks around these chain smoking hippies who were putting their feet on the table. And what they remember him is that one of the things they remember of him is that the more disrespectful they were in his presence, because his disciples in Sri Lanka would have been just absolutely appalled by the way people were behaving around him and toward him. But one of the things that they said is that the more problematic people behaved, the more he wanted them to sit close. He said, "Come sit next to me." And so he would always bring them close, and he would respond to their lack of manners and their lack of respect and their lack of etiquette and their way. And what they say is that slowly they transformed. Slowly they became like people who prayed and people who didn't smoke and people who like cleaned up their lives. And it was a slow process of transformation, but it was he was so solidly rooted in his goodness that their lack of manners and lack of, their lack of refinement had no chance to prevail kind of in his presence. And it wasn't because he forced it on them. It was just the luminosity and the gravitational force of his own spiritual rootedness, right? That really transformed them. And so I see that as kind of what the Quran is saying, is that if we respond, if we're patient and forbearing, and if we respond to ugliness with beauty, and we respond to baseness with loftiness, and we respond to darkness with light, that eventually they're going to transform, and our friendship or that adversarial relationship can become a dear friendship.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah.
So, I see we're approaching the hour.
Oh no.
I know. You didn't let me breeze through it like I was
I'm
hoping
sorry.
to, but that's a good thing. Maybe we just do a quick read, a
Okay.
piece of this. We come back to human nature on 51, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Whenever we are gracious to man, to the human being, al-insan, he goes away haughtily. But as soon as evil touches him, he turns to prolonged prayer. And so this is again that, the waffling attitude and
foul weather friendship.
Right.
Right.
And the lesson here is that we are in need of God. And when he shows us that need, we turn to him. And so your observation from so many of these nights that, God brings you close through the trials. But the real challenge is to remain close and focused even when you're given ease, and to not forget that this is from God and it could be taken away. Yeah. That is the test. And then the prophet is being told to say to them, have you ever thought, what if this revelation really is from God? Like, do you ever think, what if it's actually true and you still reject it? Who could be more astray than someone who cuts himself off so far from God? And I love this next verse, which is why I recited these other two. We shall show them our signs. And it's in the future tense. Sanurihim ayatina. And there's in the farthest horizons, so in the external world, in the world of nature, or of wafi anfusihim, and within their own kind of spiritual psychology, the depth
their own souls,
hatta yatabayyana lahum annahu al-haq, until it absolutely becomes clear to them that this annahu, and this references that it is the truth, that is generally, I think, understood to be the Qur'an, that this revelation is true.
Right.
Is it not enough that your Lord witnesses everything? And so you have a partial perspective, and just accept that. uh, and if you put your belief in a God who sees everything, and you put your trust in him, you're never going to be anxious or worried about why this or that, because there's a sovereign who's overseeing it all. It's just a lovely,
Yeah.
just captures it all. Truly, they doubt that they will meet their Lord, but truly he encompasses everything.
Yeah. Muhit.
إنه يا بكل شيء محيط.
Yeah. Like
He's
God is
everything.
completely enveloping
Yeah.
everything. Yeah. So the vision that I'm getting here is that as we look at our lives, as we look at our own souls, as we look at history, as we look at the world, as we look at nature, we're really just gazing upon this theater of signs,
Yeah.
right? That this writing of God, right? This writing that the indications and the subtle illusions and the pointers are all around us and within us, so that no matter where we look, the signs of God are like twinkling and beckoning us. And so the Quranic vision, both of the cosmos as well as of the I guess the universe of the self, is that everywhere you look, the signs of God are waiting for you. And so I guess one of the arts of the life of faith is cultivating a desire to see the signs, and then the ability to start reading those signs, because it's everywhere. Nothing is as it seems. We look around and we think we understand what we're seeing, but the Quran is saying no. Right?
Yeah, this reminds me of the prophetic prayer. Allahumma arini haqiqat al-ashya'i kamahi.
Nice.
God, show us the reality of things as they truly are, because things are not always what they seem. And perhaps you might despise something, but it's good for you. And you might love something, but it's terrible for you. And so live not in your own head, but in submission, and in trust to something that's far greater and created you, and to which you will ultimately return. It's inexorable. It's coming. And that's the core message that I get from this every time.
Yeah.
I'll tell a little story. Sheikh Hamza tells a story, and he's told it in public, so I can share it. Sheikh Hamza, is it okay we can end with this story?
Yes, please. Yeah.
It's he is. I've never seen anyone who loves books more than him. He is always reading something, and if he comes, he used to come and sometimes say salam, and he'd see like a pile of books on my desk, and he'd say Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Mahan, but he would be looking at the books. And he'd pick up the book, and he's wanting to engage me, but I feel he's built this way that he's just drawn to the text. And he says, how are you doing? And he's like flipping through. And he said, this is interesting. Have you read this? And but he's absorbed by the text. And so I could go on and tell you many beautiful things about this experience with him. But then he said once, when he's at the airport, sometimes he can't sit and read, so he likes to walk around and see what other people are reading. And he was in the lounge once, and he saw someone reading the Qur'an, and so it didn't look like it was a Muslim, but it was just someone who was reading the Qur'an. And he sat by him for a while, and he was reading, and then he asked him, what do you think? What do you think of this book? And he said, it scared the hell out of you. But then it gives you just enough hope. That was his response.
Wow.
And Sheikh Hamza was like, wow, you got that in your first read. So that really sums it up. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not even sure how to respond to that. I'm just taking that in, but that's
sure.
beautiful and heavy at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think that I guess the last part of that is what we cling to, is that it gives us just enough hope.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, even as we look at difficult days ahead for the planet and for, the global political situation and whatever else is coming, we have to cling to that hope stubbornly and tenaciously. We have to hold on to that hope and trust that somehow, some way, God's benevolent plan is unfolding.
Yes. Alhamdulillah. Well, nicely put. And
Thank you, Sidi.
we should let people go. God bless you tonight. It's a blessed night. May Allah accept your acts of devotion tonight and through the remainder of these last few nights of this month.
Yes, and pay attention to the signs on the horizons and in your own souls, because it may well be that tonight is the night of power, when the angels descend and are as we read even today, where the angels descend. And so let's be, if that's going to happen, let's be awake to it, inshallah.
Inshallah.
All right, assalamu alaikum.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalam.